a lot of us have used the I Ching as a personal tool, as a tool for helping us make decisions in our lives, as a way of connecting with things that are hard for us to put into words, as a way of sort of opening our minds to possibilities we might not have seen. And especially in the West, it has long been used in that way. The Wilhelm Baines translation. So, Mr. Garten and fiancé. So glad you're here. It's long been used as a tool for personal discovery. However, if you look at the history of the use of the I Ching, it was certainly used in that way by wise people and educated people, but it was in many ways principally a tool for understanding how society works. It was used by rulers and leaders, not just to throw the I Ching and see if you're going to win a battle, but to understand how to think about society as a whole. And one of the reasons that the I Ching is so pertinent to today's world is that so many of our societal models, our economic models, our political models, and our spiritual models as they pertain to the social world seem broken to us. That we're making the best of a bad job. We can see that communism doesn't really work. We can see that democracy has a lot of, it does some things well, but in terms of protecting the environment, it's a total failure at this point. We can see that capitalism seems to be good in some ways, and a centrally directed economy seems to be good in some ways. But many, many people feel that although we're using these expedient ways of understanding our world, we don't have confidence in a model that has a great deal of depth and a great deal of breadth, whose understanding of human society really encompasses the complexity, the depth, the profundity, the ecology, how to relate to ordinary people, how to relate to big issues. How do you think about something that is so complicated and vast, and also without reducing it to just a mechanism, so that when you think about your world as a leader of an organization or a country or an empire, so that you're actually acknowledging the sacredness of the world and the basic goodness of human beings, and at the same time are able to engage the very, very real difficulty of the practicalities of bringing all these things together. So I am presenting this as a candidate for that kind of a model that provides a very compact language and structure for thinking about it. I'm not presenting it as sort of a new, Samten, what was the word that you presented to me?
Ideology.
A new ideology that one would adopt and apply. I'm presenting it as a jungle gym that one can swing around in to understand one's world in new ways. So let's take a look at, does it work? Yes. So, the I Ching integrates in its presentation the spiritual world of lineages of wisdom, of what we call drala, or the magical forces of the world, of personal practice that opens our heart, political, cultural, and economic world, and the natural world of ecology, the 5 elements, and the 4 seasons. All of these are explicitly included in the language and structure of the I Ching. And for that reason, I believe it's a unique resource for visionary leaders that provides a map of how a society that's truly integrated can work. Now, when I say truly integrated, I mean that a society is resonant with all these different levels. So if you think of, for instance, capitalism, it's highly resonant with people's sense of creativity, but it's totally tone deaf in terms of the ecology. So the idea is, how can a society be resonant on all of these different strata? And it also talks about how a society evolves into a sense of resonance or integration, which is to say, just knowing the end point is not the tool we need. It is an important part of the tool, but we also have to understand what kind of process would have to take place if you're going to take an unintegrated society and gradually bring it into a sense of resonance with people's hearts and the natural world and with itself. The key principle, you might say, in this way of thinking about society is the principle of warriorship. And obviously I'm borrowing a term from Shambhala, but what it means here, warriorship, is the bravery to go beyond survival mentality, to actually identify with the world you're in without any bias toward what I'm getting and what I'm not getting. So you can see with eyes that don't have bias. And therefore, because you see that way, you might almost say your eyes become resonant with the practicalities of the world and resonant with the sacredness of the world, with heaven and earth. And that kind of loyalty to heaven, which is the sense of loyalty to immediacy, almost you could say, of seeing freshly on the spot. You develop a sense of strength and fearlessness. You're not caught by hope and fear. And by being resonant with earth, you develop a sense of virtue, because basic nature of earth is interdependence, so that you're actually not trying to get more for yourself and take it away from others, but you're actually trying to connect with how interdependence actually works. So being loyal and resonant, you achieve equanimity, which is that Zong character. I always like that. It's a square with a line right through the center, which means no bias. And that allows a warrior or a leader, almost the same word in this context, to transmit the energy of heaven into human society without corruption. So this principle of virtue, of being a genuine person, is at the heart of every strata of meaning in the I Ching. That obviously, if you want to understand how to get power, it's a lot easier to get power with Mr. Machiavelli than it is with Mr. Confucius. You know? And Machiavelli does it better than Mr. Confucius does. But if you want to create an enlightened society, the principle of personal virtue, which means openness, non-bias, going beyond hope and fear, and truly caring for others more than yourself, is a principle that has to be understood. So great leaders have these challenges of, if you start to enter into that way of knowing yourself, at that point you realize, if I'm going to actually be of help to the world, I need to understand the underlying structure of society and how it's put together. In other words, I need an owner's manual. If you said, well, I know how to drive a car my life, but now I'm going to be asked to be the car mechanic, I have to know how the car works. So we have to understand the actual mechanisms of how human organization works and how it embeds in the natural environment. You also have to understand ripeness, you might say, which is like any good farmer, you know when to pick the tomato or the cantaloupe or the rutabaga. And that means being attuned to states of change, that you understand the seasons of development, so that even though you know what your goal is, you're not leaping forward to that goal, but you understand how to wait for things to ripen. So you have to understand how the cycles of change within society work. And you have to understand how to use ideology, political and economic systems, because they're good tools. But you can't be co-opted by them. Your view as a leader has to go beyond the tools you use. And again, you have to understand virtue as the proper basis of power, and you have to actually start to manifest as a reference point of sanity of someone who, within their own life, joins heaven and earth, so that society can crystallize around you. And we've all had this experience in our own lives of working with or for someone who is extraordinarily genuine, and all of a sudden you think, I want to be like that too. It wasn't my first idea of what I was going to do with my life, but this is more interesting than just thinking about myself. It's scarier, but it's more interesting.